Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation, which rightly, at least by communion of name, keeps me very close to the spirituality of Montfort, but it is essential in the history of the Church not to pass through the testimony and charism of Montfort, and this for a very simple reason. Louis-Marie Grigod Montfort was a man who took seriously the time that God gave him. This, for us, is an immense lesson, that is, even before thinking about what this person did, that is, concretely how he developed through a work, a foundation, a writing, a gaze, etc. We should say that saints like this are saints who have kept their feet in the present and have done something significant for the time in which they lived. This, I tell you at this moment in history, is not a given for us Christians, who always live in a double dimension of alienation or live with a spasmodic nostalgia for the past and, therefore, we continue to celebrate the past, as if the most interesting part of our history, even the history of the Church, had happened in the past, and, at the same time, perhaps we are alienated from the future, that is, in the hope that something interesting will happen. So, in the nostalgia for the past and in the hope for a future, we almost always miss the present, which is the only concrete thing that the Lord has given us. And the present means saying, answering a very simple question, how can we become saints now? Not simply as the saints became in the 1700s or as they will become saints in 23 and 300, but how can we become saints now? Which means understanding that until we change our perspective on the present, usually when we talk about the present, we always talk about it by emphasizing the glass half empty, the crises, the defeats, the declining numbers, the problems we are experiencing. Almost never do we look at the present with blessing, that is, God has hidden a good in this present. This is what it means to look with blessing. But this good is not obvious. It must be dug up, it must be brought out, it must be valued. And this good, in order to be valued, needs our, here I am, our, yes. We are in a significant place, Loreto, which is the home of, here I am, of Mary's, yes. So we could say that if we are here today, it is because a person like Louis-Marie Grigod Montfort seriously lived his present. He said his, yes, his, here I am. He took up the challenges of that present and did his part by teaching us this method, not simply by repeating the same things that he did, not necessarily, but by doing exactly as he did, that is, by striving to take up the challenge of that present and to know that at that moment it was necessary to become saints. And we too at this moment must become saints with what is around us. So, this certainly does not eliminate crises. It does not eliminate problems. It does not eliminate all those flaws that we constantly notice every time we reflect, look, and analyze. But we must not forget that all this does not absolve us of responsibility. On the contrary, it calls each of us to say what our part is. What does it mean to do at this moment what Louis-Marie Grigod Montfort did? What does it mean for us to be tremendously relevant? Now, what I am about to give you may be an interested quote because we have an Augustinian pope, but in reality Augustine understood this very clearly because when Augustine had to define God's time, he said that God is eternal. So where do we encounter eternity? Augustine said, not in the future or even in the past. Eternity is the present. Therefore, if we want to enter into a relationship with the eternity of God, we must enter into a relationship with this present. Here, I want to tell you right away that even though we are clear about our problems, our limitations, our challenges, the attitude of heart that we must maintain is the attitude of knowing that we are not out of time, but are exactly where we should be, in this space, in this time that Providence has given us, so that we can become saints, and we have an advantage and a disadvantage, a bit like everyone else. When Jesus has to describe reality, he always warns his disciples against partial interpretations that are always ideological interpretations. He tells the parable of the wheat and the weeds, saying that it is naivety for the servants to say to the master, "Send us to gather the weeds," that is, to remove all the evil that exists in that field. In that parable, Jesus puts a wise word in the mouth of the master. He says, "No, don't go and do this stuff here because you risk throwing away the wheat too. Let them grow together." Quote. So, what does Jesus want to tell us through this parable? That even our present, even our time, is always a mixture of darkness and light, of wheat and weeds, of God's grace and problems to face, and that it is naive of us to think that we only have to deal with uprooting problems, with solving problems. They will always be there. They will change clothes. There will be other challenges, other limitations, but they will always keep us company. But this should not put us in the position of using those problems and those analyses to say we can't do anything, we can't become saints. If we had lived in the times of Louis, Mary, Grigold, Montfort, we would certainly have become saints. Today, however, in our globalized, hyper-technological, individualistic world, it is so difficult. Perhaps it is impossible to become saints. It is not true. The field is always the same, and weeds, the grace of God and the problems to face. So, this means that I believe that in order to truly honor such a saint, we need to roll up our sleeves and say what we can do now, having the same attitude, the same trust, the same faith, the same charisma, the same gaze, the same Marian alphabet. In short, we could have the posture that this man has before reality and then translate this posture into something that is unique and unrepeatable, because this time in which we live is unique and unrepeatable. So, I wanted to make this initial introductory clarification simply to tell you that this morning, we could risk talking to ourselves if we do not understand that everything we do, like the days you are living, the hours you are living, the prayers and reflections you are experiencing, are not on the margins of life. They are not a way of escaping from everyday life and reality, but are simply ways through which we, returning home, returning to everyday life, should take the reality that we have before us more seriously, with more courage, with more faith, with more light. So Christianity does not unite with life like water with oil. And you know that water and oil never mix together. If I take a bottle of water and put a little oil in it and shake the water, in the end when the waters calm down, the oil is oil and the water is water. But the image that Jesus uses is that of yeast in the dough. And what does the yeast do? You don't see it anymore, but you realize that there is yeast. Why? Because it ferments, it leavens the whole dough. So you understand that this is our gesture. These days are yeast for us, not oil. These are things that at a certain point we will no longer see physically because these hours end, our being together ends. But the fruits of our being together, the fruits of these days will be seen in the effects. Why? Because the purpose is to leaven our life, to make it rise, to give it back a mysterious, inner strength that can lift it up. And it is not simply something, relegated to these days. The church at this moment in history is living a time of extraordinary grace, which is that of the Jubilee. Now what I will tell you, and this is also the title that was entrusted to me, is that the world has closed its heart, fruits of the Jubilee, mercy and reconciliation. The words that I am about to give you will echo this somewhat and therefore cannot fail to dialogue with this particular time, which is the time of the Jubilee. So, I would like to start by giving you a general reading that can perhaps help us understand that the Jubilee is not a series of Christian practices that we do as a sort of technique and that then in the end have some result. If we were to entrust our lives to a simple technique, then we would not need either the Incarnation or the Son of God. A simple instruction booklet would suffice. But we know that we do not simply need rules to adhere to in our lives. We need a new life, and so a technique is not enough for us. It is not enough for us to say, we have made a pilgrimage, we have said prayers, we have done Christian practices. All this automatically bears fruit in our existence, because it is not so much the technique, but what the technique indicates to us, what the Christian practice wants to give back to each of us. Now I would like to convey to you the extraordinary beauty that is hidden behind the Jubilee and behind this opportunity that is given to each of us. But to do this one should say, you are taking it far from Adam and Eve. Yes, I would like to start exactly from there, that is, I would like to start from Genesis, I would like to start from what happened when God created the world. There is something very beautiful. In the discourse of creation, God creates the world and creates it one piece at a time. He creates the heavens, He creates the earth, He creates the animals, He creates the plants. At the heart of this creation at a certain point He creates man, He separates the light from the darkness, in short He does everything that we know that is recounted in the book of Genesis. But there is a gesture that God makes at the end of creation. At the end of creation, Genesis says, God rested. God needs to rest. It almost seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? It almost seems like a very anthropomorphic idea of God, that is, too similar to us. But ultimately the Bible is telling us something very important. On the one hand, it is necessary to create, but then on the other hand, after we have done it, we need to rest, that is, to contemplate, to realize what we have done. I will try to translate it in a very existential way because otherwise we might not be able to grasp this small nuance. Imagine that each of you goes to the kitchen to prepare a good dish, but after you have worked hard to prepare this good dish, I don't know, to knead bread, to prepare something that is elaborate, that requires effort, requires commitment, then you don't have time to enjoy that dish, you don't have time to take a piece of that bread and say, how good it is. So, all that effort, if it does not end in the enjoyment of what you have done, is a waste, because all that work takes on meaning when you, enjoying what you have done, fill your heart with gratitude because you say, this is a wonderful Italian expression, that it was worth it. It means that there are moments in life when we feel pain, fatigue. But when you savor that thing, you say, it was worth it. So, you understand the purpose of the day when the Lord, at the end of creation, stops to rest and to savor what He has done and to show each of us that our life remains human only, and only if we are still capable of savoring life, of being able to see everything that is beyond doing. So this is the first image that I want to leave you with. The second image comes from the chronicle of the history of Israel, namely, the Sabbath, which is the place and the day in which God rests and therefore savors creation, is filled with further meaning when, in the particular history of the people of Israel, Israel ends up in Egypt. What happens in Egypt? What happens is that Israel falls into slavery. Well, if someone were to say what slavery is, we could define it this way. Slavery is being deprived. Be careful, I'll use some difficult words, but I hope to explain them well. Being deprived of being able to be, because a slave does not have the right to be, but only to do. He must work, work, work. He has no freedom to be different from his actions. And you know that God listens to the cry of the people who cry out to heaven about this unhappiness. In practice, God realizes that Israel is unhappy and puts into action a whole strategy to free Israel from Egypt. But there would be so much to say about what the Pharaoh symbolizes, that place, that path. We know for sure, however, that at a certain point God with his power restores freedom to Israel because he frees them from that slavery. He gives them a freedom that they must learn at a high price. But the real sign of this passage is that they are no longer slaves, but free people, and this is seen on the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is the day on which Israel must remember that they are no longer slaves. If we were to translate it very simply, we would say this. The Sabbath has this slogan, remember that you are free. You are not just the verb to do. There is a day of the week when you must remember the verb to be. That is, there is a day of the week when you must remember who you are. Do you understand how important the Sabbath is? And I tell you this because if you read the Gospel, you will dislike the Sabbath because Jesus constantly challenges the wrong interpretation of the Sabbath. But the Sabbath has an extraordinary meaning. God gives man the Sabbath so that on the Sabbath he can savor his own existence and remember that he is free. That is why on the Sabbath it was forbidden to work or do any activity. Because what did the tradition of this Sabbath teach? It said, we must put down the tools of doing and live an entire day in which I strive not to do in order to remember who I am and to remember that God has given me freedom. Look, in a week where we are taken up with problems, worries, work, things to deal with, sleepless nights, bills that are due, and so on. After so many days of living like this, after so many weeks and months, at a certain point you feel like a slave because you no longer see any way out, you no longer feel any pleasure in your existence, you feel completely empty. So you have to recover this way that the Lord has of teaching you to keep up with the rhythms of existence. For us, the Sabbath is actually Sunday that has become the Lord's day. What is the purpose of Sunday? To remind you that you are free. And through what do we remember that we are free? If Israel remembers that it is free because it remembers the exodus of the people of Israel from Egypt, a Christian remembers on Sunday that he is free because on Sunday he remembers that he is loved. He is loved. Look, when a person feels loved, he feels free. And this love of ours is so concrete that it is not a piece of information, but it is someone. This love has a name, it is Jesus. Jesus who dies, that is, who gives his life for us, dies and rises again for us. So at least one day a week I must return to this love, because if I do not return to this love I begin to be a slave. At least once a week I must remember this love. At least once a week I must mysteriously let myself be embraced by this love. The act of embracing surpasses all information because the embrace is an experience. Where do we Christians have this type of experience? In the sacraments. So you understand that frequenting the sacraments is frequenting the experience of Jesus' love. And the more you experience Jesus' love, the more you remember that you are free, the more you feel that you are free, the more your life breathes again. Can you follow me in this discussion? Well, then you see how there has been a sort of stratification. No, in the very concept of the Sabbath, which for us then became Sunday, the Sabbath, the place of God's rest, that is, the place where you must return to savor your life. You are a mother, you are a father, you have children. What is it? When was the last time you enjoyed your children? In the sense that you really felt the taste of that paternity, of that maternity. Well, look, we who are in a mechanism of doing, do you know what expression we use to describe the taste of things? It is wasting time. I wasted time with my son, I wasted time with my wife, I wasted time with my friends. I am a consecrated person, I wasted time with the people entrusted to me. What is a waste of time in the logic of business? It is a waste of time. In the logic of God, it is to enjoy. Do you understand? If instead I were to say, and I do not waste time with my son because, for my son, I go to work every morning, I make sacrifices, I bring home the bread, I send him to the best schools, but he does not simply want this son of yours, he wants a father, he wants a mother, that is, he wants the taste of a relationship, not simply the utilitarianism of a relationship. Christianity brings us back exactly to this concept of the Sabbath. On this concept of the Sabbath, there is the second layering, which is that of freedom. We remember at least one day a week that we do not coincide with the verb to do, but we are also the verb to be. We remember who we are. What does Christianity do? It reminds us that the liberating experience, redemption, comes through the experience of love, but not love as the world teaches, love as feeling, love as emotion, but love made 𝗟𝘂𝗶𝗶 became flesh. This love made flesh is Jesus, and therefore the more you spend time with Jesus, the more you recover this freedom of yours. Now, only if we have before our eyes this gaze and this concept, therefore the taste of the Sabbath, the freedom of the Sabbath, the liberation of the Sabbath through love, therefore creation, the exodus of the people of Israel from Egypt and the experience of the passion, death and resurrection of Christ. Only in this way can we understand the Jubilee. Do you know what the Jubilee is? It is an extended Sabbath. It is a Sunday stretched over a year. In practice, what we should normally do once a week, the Church gives us every 25 years give an entire year in which the main work for that entire year is to recover the taste, freedom, and experience of love. I don't do Jubilee practices. A Jubilee lived well can change your life. Because it can give you back that taste that you have lost. Because it can give you back that freedom that you no longer feel. Because it can make you feel that love that must once again give meaning to your life. So, when you conceive of the Jubilee simply as the sum of many events, you have not understood what the Jubilee is, because the Jubilee is an opportunity, set up by the Church every so many years to give back to each of us what we need to feel life again is something alive. So, if we had to say why we need the Jubilee, I have identified at least 3 fundamental reasons why we need it. That is, following the title of our meeting, what should be the fruits of the Jubilee? In other words, what are the fundamental needs that the Jubilee gives to each of us? The first is this. Life in its aspects every day inevitably makes us experience being. Quoting these words, you immediately understand who I am referring to. It makes us inevitably tired, weary, and oppressed. Do you remember this beautiful expression of Jesus who, looking at the people in front of him, opens his eyes and says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Now, I really shouldn't waste too much time telling you what tiredness, fatigue, and a sense of oppression are, because more or less all of us have experienced them in life. And that is to say, you can be a good, honest person, who prays, who follows the rules, but this does not make you safe. At a certain point you feel tired. Tired because your energy runs out. Tired because you, pay attention to what I'm about to tell you, have done everything you could, but it was not enough. And in short, you have done everything you could do. You have perhaps put in even more than your strength, but you have not obtained the result that you needed. And this thing tires us because we too need gratification, right? And so if you make an effort and you are rewarded for that effort, well, in some way there is a sort of, no, but when you do something, you do everything you can and you have not achieved your result, you are drained of energy, you are tired. Tired means that what until yesterday or the day before yesterday you could do it spontaneously, today it's very difficult. I'm in a family, I'm normally a patient person, but I'm so tired that I can't stand anyone. Tiredness doesn't even let you do the bare minimum. It even takes away the minimum that should be your humanity. The third thing is what the gospel calls oppression. You know when we say, I feel something here in my chest that crushes the pit of my stomach, I feel oppressed, it takes my breath away. The sense of oppression that we all have, yes, that manifests itself in many ways, right? Well, it means that we feel crushed by life, crushed by responsibilities, crushed by duty. I'll open and close a parenthesis, and this is not an excuse and what I'm about to tell you, but very often the sins we commit are sins of escapism, that is, we are so oppressed by life that sin is a way to go and get stimuli in the wrong places. Drugs are not a solution, but at that moment they are an escape. Now take away the word drugs and put in wrong relationships, wrong relationship. With things, with money, with work, and in regulated emotions. It's not that we do these things because we are all evil, perverse, and wicked. Very often we do it because life has become unbearable and we have found ways of escaping it that don't change the burden of sin that we have committed, but that make us understand it. That is, they make us understand that if you want to stop sinning, you have to change your life, not simply resist not committing sins, because if you simply resist, you won't resist. But if you change your life, you will eliminate all the symptoms of which sin is one of the symptoms of such a life. We have 2 evangelical icons that explain to us what this sense of being tired, weary, oppressed is. The first is found right at the beginning of the Gospel, and it is the first encounter that Jesus has with his disciples, especially with Peter. It is the famous miraculous catch of fish. Well, we have called it the miraculous catch of fish, but in reality we should say that it was initially a failure, that is, Peter, an expert fisherman, went fishing all night, he doesn't catch anything. Do you remember what I told you earlier? You've done everything you could do, and at the end of a night of toil someone asks you a question. Did you catch anything? And he replies, nothing, sir. We worked hard all night and we didn't catch anything. What does Jesus do? He doesn't say, no, it doesn't matter. You are worth more than your work, don't worry. I mean, these are consoling speeches, and sometimes we have simply transformed Christianity into a consoling speech. But Peter could have rightly answered Jesus in this way. He could have said, what do you mean it doesn't matter? Who brings home the bread? And how do I support my family? I mean, cheap consolations are useless. We need facts. And what does Jesus do? He invites him to be careful and trust in him. Put out into the deep, but Lord, it is day. Put out into the deep and let down your nets. And Peter says, it is day. We have worked hard all night, but at your word you will 𝗟𝘂𝗶𝗴𝗶. At your word I will let down the nets. How beautiful this is. In practice, do you know what it is, how this healing happens? Because Peter trusts. He trusts in whom? In Jesus. Through what? He trusts in the word of Jesus. Friends, if you say, we have faith in Jesus, my question is, what does it mean to have faith in Jesus? It means to do what Jesus says. This means to have faith in him, to trust in his word. And where do we find the word of Jesus? In the gospel. But if we do not read the gospel, excuse me, through what should we take the word of Jesus seriously? Because we have reduced the word of Jesus to little pieces of the word of Jesus that are somewhat imposed on us in some liturgy, but we are not used to reading the word of Jesus and taking it seriously, that is, to trusting in that word as something that can heal us. We are not men and women of our word. You know how that story ends when Peter trusts and, trusting, puts out into deep water, and the nets were so full of fish that he had to call the company next door to help him because otherwise the nets would burst. In other words, there is an overabundance compared to this. So, in order for the time of the Jubilee to bear fruit, this is the time when we must return to the Word, to read the Word, to meditate on the Word, to trust in that Word, to make the Word the objective criterion of our life. Well, I don't understand the Word, but for me it is complicated, but for me it is like this. These are excuses for those who frequent the Word at a certain point or evangelized by the Word little by little. They change their life. The second biblical image that this first part gives us is the calming of the storm. In the story it is said that the disciples who are at the mercy of the storm try in every way with their strength to row to reach the shore, but they fail. Now, you know when you have serious, very serious problems, terrible worries, and you try with all your strength to get there, you get there and you can't do it. So, at that moment, what does Jesus do? He walks on the water. That is, you are drowning in those waters and Jesus instead has the power to come to your aid precisely through those problems. And what does he say? Courage, it's me. Don't be afraid. Until Jesus welcomes him into the boat. The gospel says that as soon as Jesus set foot in the boat immediately touched the shore. Until you let Jesus get into your boat, you are destined to row and not get anywhere. And do you know what this can generate inside us? That we can go to Mass on Sunday, say our prayers, say our rosary, put on our chain of attachment to Mary, do all these things, but deep down we never let Jesus get into the boat because we are afraid of letting Jesus get into the boat. We are afraid to say, "Thy will be done." We are afraid to trust Him because we think that if Jesus gets into the boat, we will lose. This is a demonic vision that the devil suggests to us to keep us away from Jesus. And it is a bit like saying, "Look, Jesus, I offer you all the masses, rosaries and consecrations that you want, but please do not get in, because if you get in, some tragedy will surely come and something bad will happen." It is the opposite. And until He gets in the boat, your life is a tragedy. But if He gets in the boat, you will immediately reach shore. So, you see, this is the second word, A. The first is the trust that comes from listening, and here instead the trust that comes from abandoning oneself to His will. The Jubilee is the place where we must learn to trust in God, saying, "Thy will be done." What have I described to you so far? That the Jubilee is the place where we recover faith. Second characteristic, we all have a heart, but the first illness that the heart must face is that of impurity. This is the serious problem. We do not have a pure heart. And what is the serious problem? That if I am talking to you about purity, purity of heart, you think only one thing. But instead, the gospel teaches us to broaden our perspective, to remind each of us that purity of heart is a very serious matter that I will try to say and explain in this way. In the Beatitudes, Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." In practice, if you have a pure heart, you see. If you do not have a pure heart, you do not see. And if you do not see, you do not know where to go, you do not know where to turn, you do not know what the meaning of the things in front of you is, you do not enjoy anything. Only if you see do all these things become possible. But what does purity of heart consist of? It is in having a unified heart. Because an impure heart is a split heart, a double heart, a hypocritical heart. It is a heart where we are one, none, and 100,000. We are not one person, but we are many different people. So, there is a Luigi the parish priest, a Luigi the professor, a Luigi who is alone in his room, a Luigi when he is driving, a Luigi with his friends, a Luigi yes, yes. But of all these Luigis, who is Luigi? I mean, we need to find something that unites us in a single person. This is purity of heart. And when a person is impure, how do you see that he is impure? By the fact that he is dominated by everything, even by an affectivity, by a sexuality, by an attachment to food, by possessions, by control. In short, a heart that is not pure is at the mercy of life. A pure heart, on the other hand, is a free heart and sees and therefore has the gift of discernment because it sees. Let's see where in the Bible we find someone who can help us to illuminate this part, and you will understand why the Jubilee is important. It is King David who is a wonderful man, but he is a terrible man at the same time. And there is a moment, I often quote it as a passage because in my opinion it is significant, a moment in David's life in which David completely manifests a duplicity of heart, and that is the moment in which this man, after having gone through so much suffering, so many problems, so many persecutions, has settled into a position of dominance. He has become the king. He is a king who has an army, a city, a palace, but then at a certain point the problem of being a king is believing oneself to be a king, and this is the real problem. In practice, when life always goes in the right direction, well, the Psalms translate it like this: man in prosperity does not understand. Let's find a modern term. There are moments in life when you become delirious, omnipotent. You think you can do everything, that you have everything under control. Since you have money, you can do everything. Since you have health, you can afford anything. Since you are intelligent, you can manipulate people as you please. It's an illusion, it's a drunkenness. Do you understand? So, what happens to David? In this drunkenness, he had an harem with 1,000 women at his disposal. Please, let's not open this topic because it's terrible. Let's not get into it. Here, what I'm saying is not an excuse, but culturally this person has a lot of women at his disposal, right? He falls in love with the wife of a friend of his who sees her while she is bathing on the terrace of the palace across the street. In short, she is the wife of 𝗟𝘂𝗶𝗶. In the meantime, 𝗟𝘂𝗶𝗶 is fighting battles for him, who is the king. And what does he do? He calls this woman, he sleeps with this woman, and this woman becomes pregnant. So he tries to invent something to hide, this pregnancy. He makes Uriah come back. He tries to make him sleep at home. He doesn't succeed. In short, in all these clever tricks in which David tries to land on his feet, in the end he will decide to kill this friend of his and he will succeed. He will have him killed in battle. As soon as the news arrives that his friend is dead, he takes his wife, takes possession of her, brings her home and becomes the wife of King David. Beautiful, right? Terrible. Can a person do this? Yes. When a person has lost the purity of heart, he is capable of anything. And do you know what the problem is? That someone with an impure heart does not realize that he is doing evil. He calls the evil he does the best possible good for him. In short, he always finds a justification for the terrible things he does, and so he actually has a dull conscience. But God does not let him get away with it and sends his prophet Nathan to speak to David. What does Nathan do? He goes to court. He's the court prophet. Nathan, He goes to court with great prudence and says, "My king, I have a case to bring before you." The king is the supreme judge, so it's right to go to the king. A man has many sheep, but his neighbor has only one sheep. What did this man do? Since his friend came to dinner, he went and took the only sheep of the friend next door to kill it and feed his friend. David turns red, gets angry, and says, "This man is guilty of death. He will have to pay 4 times as much for this, you see?" He gets angry, and Nathan looks him in the eye and says, "Are you this man?" Bam! Do you know what this is called in terms of spiritual theology? It's called contrition. Basically, David experiences what is called sorrow for sins. Be careful, friends, do not confuse feelings of guilt with the pain of sin, because the purpose of the pain of sin is to change your life. Guilt very often imprisons you. David immediately feels pierced by Nathan's words. He immediately repents. He does not look for excuses. And this is an immense lesson for each of us. We always find 1,000 excuses to justify our filth, right? When David realized that he had made a mistake, he called things by their name. And tradition has it that at that moment, lying in the ashes, in the dust and in the most total repentance, tradition tells us that he recites Psalm chapter 50. "Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a holy spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence. Do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of being saved. Sustain in me a generous spirit." Psalm chapter 50 is extraordinarily beautiful, and it is the moment in which David is no longer just a nobody, 100,000. He has returned to being a single person, David. We learn this stuff by experiencing mercy. If the Jubilee does not serve to learn contrition, then it is useless, because this time is a time in which we should return to yearning for a pure heart, to being a single person. And do you know how we learn to have a pure heart? Basically two things, by approaching the mercy of God and at the same time becoming merciful ourselves. People who want to heal themselves must live acts of charity, because only gratuitous charity heals people's hearts. Put yourself at the service. Are you someone who practices mercy? But what mercy? Look, the Church has taught us that there are at least 14 ways to exercise mercy, 7 material and 7 spiritual. We have no excuses, huh? Go and get a list of the works of mercy and say, I can do this right now, this tomorrow, this. But if you practice a work of mercy every day, know that the fruit that work of mercy gives you is the healing of the heart. So, do you know what gives us a pure heart? It is not to analyze the heart, but to love. Loving heals your heart, loving freely. That is why Peter says, charity covers a multitude of sins. Those who practice charity have a heart that works. So, you see, on the one hand, the contrition that we must offer in mercy, therefore in the sacrament of confession, and at the same time knowing that the convalescence after someone has put you back on your feet is played out entirely in charity. If the Jubilee is not the time in which we practice works of charity and mercy, we do not have the means of healing. Do you understand? You want a pure heart, put yourself at the service. Why are we certain that Mary had a pure heart? Why is the first thing she did was go to Elizabeth to put herself at the service of this woman? The third and last thing is a broken and humiliated heart. So, up until now, it almost seems that we find ourselves in a situation where we are either tired, weary, and oppressed, so life has tired us out, or our sinful situation has led us to no longer have a pure heart. Be careful though, there's all the evil and pain that life has in store for us that very often destroys us. Losing a person you love, going through a trial, experiencing illness, losing a job, a security. All these things very often destroy our hearts. They fragment them. We no longer have faith in anything. Well, do you know something? God has a very special predilection for people who have a broken heart. If God loves someone, in particular, it is precisely people who have a broken heart. Why? Because they resemble His Son on the cross. And what does Jesus feel on the cross? He feels abandoned. He feels alone. He feels powerless. He feels that everyone is against Him. The experience of the cross is going through a broken and humiliated heart. And I think that perhaps all of us have our hearts broken a little by something that has happened. So, the Jubilee is the place of hope, because you see the place where when everything seems lost, you, like Jesus on the cross, after saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Find the courage to also say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. which translated means I don't understand anything anymore. I don't know what to do anymore. The only thing I can do, Lord, is to put myself in your hands and hope in you. Oh God, come and save me. Lord, come quickly, and be my helper. This verse is a profession of hope, huh? That's what we have done. What is the purpose of the Jubilee? To renew faith, charity, and hope. Faith because we need to be healed from tiredness, fatigue, and oppression. Charity because we need to be healed from an impure heart and instead rediscover purity of heart. Hope because we all have a broken and humiliated heart and only trusting abandonment in God can put us back on our feet. I'll close. We have a model. Yes, it's Mary. Mary is the one who had faith because she listened to the word. So much so that she became flesh in her womb. Mary is the woman of charity because she spent, at least that's how the gospel describes it, most of her life taking care of Elizabeth, the wedding at Cana, and the disciples. Think of the Acts of the Apostles, right? She is the one who holds the disciples together before Pentecost and the woman of charity, but at the same time she is the woman of hope, because this woman was at the foot of the cross and even though she could do nothing, she remained there under the cross hoping against all hope. Who better than a witness like her can teach us to live well this time of grace of the Jubilee? Do you understand why Louis Marie Grignold Montfort was right? Mary is a sure path. Whoever takes this path, whoever travels this path, is certain to arrive where they should arrive. So let's not waste this time of grace, and above all, let's make it a watershed in our history that can establish a before and an after. This is a wish that I make for myself and for each of you. Thank you. Yeah.